Hey YouTube, Kevin Cleary here with a knife review for you, and today we have something we don't usually see or maybe even think of. We have a fixed blade from Spyderco. Now, that's not overly surprising. Spyderco actually has a number of fixed blades, but I just think normally we kind of associate them as a folder company, but this is actually a really nicely done fixed blade, and they have a few others as well. So I want to get right into the specs and share size and weight with you because that's actually a bigger part of this review than usual. So the size and weight on this guy is 7 1/8 inches overall. And so it's just over 7 inches. It's basically 3.5 inch handle, 3.5 inch blade, which is pretty cool because normally on a fixed blade of 7 inches, you're going to get more like a 4-inch handle and a 3-inch blade, which sometimes is a little small, okay, in blade length. This, however, really balances it out well, and even though that handle is fairly small, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves here, it's actually pretty hand-filling. So we'll talk more about that as we go. Let me share with you further that overall, when you put the sheath and everything here, this knife is still just under 8 inches at 7 7/8, and it only weighs 5.4 ounces. So 5.4 ounces is, you know, I have a lot of folders that weigh more than that. And so for an everyday carry knife, that's a really, really nice weight. The knife alone, if anyone cares, is 3.4 ounces, although, you know, you're never gonna carry the knife this way, so that number, I'm sorry, doesn't matter quite as much. Okay, so when we talk about size and weight, and we usually talk about carry here, I gotta tell you that this is set up for a left side kidney carry, sort of for a cross draw, and that's how I've carried it, and it is very, very comfortable. I have absolutely enjoyed carrying it in that configuration. In case you're watching, Tom, it's also very, very sharp, and we'll be coming back to you not too long from now. It may, in fact, already be there by the time this video posts. So let's now go ahead and talk about some of the other features here. We have a clip point, almost full flat ground blade, I guess a bit of a swedge here, a VG10 blade steel, nice satin finish. It's fairly good behind the edge, but not as thin as a lot of Spydercos. You know, if you're thinking this is going to perform like a PM2 or something like that, I can tell you the PM2 is quite a bit thinner behind the edge than, maybe not quite a bit, but it certainly is a bit thinner behind the edge. And the angle on this is a little wider, so it's not quite as steep of an angle. It's a little more open, okay? And maybe that's because of the steel choice. Maybe that's because of the roll that Spyderco was envisioning for this knife. Anyway, the VG10 steel has held up pretty well. You know, it's VG10, so it's not like the most stellar, amazing edge retention in the world, but it's certainly more than adequate and going to perform really, really nicely for pretty well anybody. The blade shape here is a little different. I don't know about you, but I'm not used to seeing a lot of sort of clip point, sort of Bowie style blades. This, of course, is a Perrin design, and he has a larger, I'm trying to think of the name of the larger knife that's sort of modeled after this, the Street Bowie, I think, which does sort of have that similar look to it. In terms of actual function, it's really nice. It slices well. It does all the EDC tasks like opening packages and stuff like that really well. And it has the extra versatility of being a fixed blade. So if you're cutting food up, you're not going to get any gunk in the pivot. If you are doing something that's a little more hard on your knife, then you don't have to worry about it folding on you or a lock failing or anything like that. Just a really nice, reliable fixed blade, and of course, very usable blade. Now, the handle on this is an interesting discussion, okay? It has this super, super big finger choil, which actually works really, really well, and it sort of does the same thing as, you know, the holes that are on the Browse Silent Soldier, or the holes that are on a number of smaller EDC fixed blades. This doesn't have a hole, but this very big choil adds a great deal of control and does really lock you in. The jimping on the back does the same, and so I guess, you know, we normally talk about ergonomics. One thing that I've got to say is very, very impressive here, guys, is how hand-filling this is. So normally one of the limitations of an EDC fixed blade is they're quite small, and because they're trying to be small, they don't have a lot of room for a handle. So here's a good example. This knife from Real Steel, the handle is incredibly small, like not hardly a 3-finger handle. And because of that, you're limited to what you can do with this. It's just not quite as confidence inspiring. If you pick up the Street Beat, you feel like you've really got a knife that you could get a lot of work done with. It's nice and hand-filling, very secure grip. It doesn't suffer from the lack of handle real estate that a lot of small EDC fixed blades suffer from. Of course, the micarta here is absolutely beautiful. I didn't mention this when we were talking about the blade, but notice it's a very thick piece of VG10 steel, much thicker than we're used to seeing from Spyderco. And the owner does have a lanyard on this. I'm not obviously going to take it off because I'm not going to mess with his carry system. I carried it that way. If it were my own, I definitely wouldn't have a lanyard on it, but that's totally fine. So very, very quickly, just to sum up the last 2 points, the blade is really nice, really useful for EDC tasks. The handle is very large and comfortable, especially if you compare this to other 7-inch knives. You will be really, really impressed by how hand-filling and how capable this knife feels compared to a lot of similar sized knives. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, both the blade and the handle are a total win. I really don't have any complaints on either one. I guess let's back up a little bit. The one complaint I have is I would love it if they had this handle, but then offered a bunch of different blade shapes. Okay, if I could get like a tanto or a drop point or a spear point in this, I think I would really, really appreciate that, because I actually love the handle so much that it would be awesome if you could get this in a bunch of different blade shapes. And I will say that VG10 is not my favorite steel. Now that brings up one point that I want to make before we move on to the sheath, and that is the price on this guy. They are around 170 bucks. Okay. For VG10 steel, I'm just going to say that's a little steep. Okay, now I know there are a lot of there are a lot of similar sized fixed blades out there, high-end fixed blades, and they often cost quite a bit. You know, the Bradford Guardian is fairly expensive. Anything from Bark River is pretty expensive. White River Knives has some expensive fixed blades for EDC, and a few other companies. But most of those are offered in better steel than VG10. So that is one minor hit that I will give it. It's not that VG10 is not good, but for the price, I would like to have seen something just a little better. Okay, now let's get on to our next point, which is the sheath, and then we'll do some comparisons. The sheath here is great, okay? So you got a Kydex sheath, a really, really nice, really, really versatile clip. You can see how this could go anywhere. You know, you could put it here, here, you could carry the knife right side up, upside down. Pretty much any way you could think of carrying this, you'd be able to get this configured to achieve that. And that's the main thing that I look for in a sheath. Other cool things about this, there's no wiggle in here. I'm not going to take it off camera and wave it around, but when I did do that long before this, in getting ready for this review, there's no sound, okay? I also tried a few times to get this knife to come out of the sheath by holding it upside down and shaking it around a bit, and retention is very good. So that's the other main thing we care about. If you were to ever want to carry this as sort of a neck knife on a lanyard, or even, you know, carry it up right side up so that you are maybe putting this on a backpack strap or on a chest rig or something, so you're going to come up onto your chest and remove it. There's plenty of retention to allow for that. All right, so the sheath, again, just like everything else on this, guys, is a total win. I'll be a little bit honest, or I'll be honest here, I wasn't really expecting to be super impressed by this knife, but everything about it has really, really been enjoyable. It's very comfortable in hand. The blade is very capable. The sheath is great, good retention, and allows you to put it anywhere you can think of. And so really, there's a lot of positive points on this knife. The only hit, as I say, is it's only available in the one blade shape, and the steel could be a little better. Let's go ahead now and bring in some comparisons. I've got a few other EDC fixed blades that I'll share with you. The most comparable one that I have right now is definitely the Rake Knives F815. The other one that would be similar in size is the Schrade SCHF 55. Now, These two have much nicer edge profiles for cutting things, okay? This is a little more heavily built. It's more for bush use and really hard use. Yeah, if you get a nice good edge, and I've reprofiled this a little bit, so it definitely can do EDC tasks, but it's definitely heavier than either one of these, and it's not quite, the sheath setup is not quite as good. It's still okay, not quite as awesome. So then we've got the rake there. Now it's a lot cheaper, but it's also not as good of steel, although I will say it's decent steel. 14C28N is pretty good, and I would anticipate, guys, a pretty positive review on this knife. I've really been enjoying it as well, especially as sort of a budget option. Now, just to give you a size, a bit of a comparison to a couple of folders, I have one other Spyderco here. Hold on. There we go. I've got a couple Spyderco folders that I'll bring in just to kind of give you some idea. This is, of course, the XL, so it's quite big. But that gives you an idea of what kind of size you're dealing with. And notice that you are getting as much blade length on the PM2, and you're only, you know, it's not, I wouldn't say it's that much more of an inconvenience to carry this, okay? The other thing I maybe would bring in here for comparison is, let's see here, this little guy, but he's more of a neck knife. You could, of course, as I said I've said this previous, you could clip this to your belt and carry it that way. But mostly I've used this as a neck knife, and it is really smaller than what I would want to compare to this. This gives you pretty much all the functioning of a full-size knife. Okay, so there you go. Those are some comparisons for you. Now, overall impressions, guys, if you haven't figured it out by now, I am definitely a fan. I wasn't sure, honestly, what I would think of this knife. In pictures, I've seen lots of pictures of this. I kind of feel like it's a little bit ugly, but I've got to say, in use, carrying this knife, using it, I have really, truly been blown away. It is a great option, and I'm honestly a little surprised that this is not more popular. You know, you hear a lot about the Bradford Guardians, you hear about the Bark Rivers. You don't hear a lot of people talking about the Street Beat, but it's actually a really, really well done knife. There you go. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and we will talk to you soon.